Welcome to this video log on Unveiling Jesus Christ. I'm John Cassanet, and today I'll be your most excellent tour guide as we visit the ancient medical center and temple complex of Ascalapius, located in the ancient city of Pergamum, or Pergamos according to the Greek rendition of that word. Pergamos was the third city that John wrote to in Revelation chapter 2 verses 12 through 17. Saints in this city were both condemned and commended by John in his letter written in about 96 AD. The center of Asklepion is located outside the ancient or lower city of Pergamos, which is the modern-day Pergamum. I give the history of this city in a vlog published on August 30th of 2024. Here's some of the locals just hanging out near the center. They told me it's not a bad day to have us visit Ascalapius. The ancient center at Ascalapius takes its name from the hero and god of medicine in ancient Greek religion and mythology. You're probably more familiar with him than you think. If you've been to the doctor lately, you've probably seen his symbol. His symbol is incorporated into the logo of the American Medical Association. The logo contains the staff of Ascalapius. It's a single snake wrapped around a pole. This is also an obvious allusion to the brazen pole raised by Moses in the wilderness. Similarly, the symbol of the International Medical Association has the staff of Ascalapius with two snakes wrapped around a staff and wings on top. Significantly, the original Hippocratic oath taken by physicians once read, "I swear by Apollo the physician, and by Ascalapius, and by Hygeia, and by Panacea, and by all the gods." Close quote. Before getting to the sights and sounds of the Ascalapian Center, let me tell you a little bit about the man, the myth, and his legendary healing powers. First, there are several birth myths associated with Ascalapius. He was supposedly born as the son of a Thessalian princess named Coronis, who was mortal. She was also the lover of the god Apollo, and Apollo was the father of Ascalapius. Now here's where the soap opera begins. Coronis slept with another mortal named Ischus. When Apollo found out, using his prophetic powers, he killed Ischus. Then Coronis was killed by the goddess Artemis for being unfaithful to Apollo. Now I did a vlog on the Temple of Artemis on July 26 of 24, so you can go back and check out Artemis as part of my religious history of Ephesus. But at any rate, as Coronis was laid out on her funeral pyre to be consumed by fire, Apollo rescued the unborn Ascalapius by cutting him from Coronis's womb. So that's kind of myth number one. There's also a Delphian tradition that Ascalapius was born in the Temple of Apollo in Delphi. More on that later in another vlog. There's also a Phoenician tradition that maintains that Ascalapius was born of Apollo without any woman being involved. Finally, in the Roman version, Apollo learned about Coronis's betrayal with the mortal Ischus, and so then Apollo's raven Lysias killed her with his arrows. However, with her last breath, Coronis revealed to Apollo that she was pregnant with his child. So he repented and unsuccessfully tried to save her, but he removed their son Ascalapius from her belly just before she was consumed by fire. We're now going to do a walking tour through the healing center, and while we do so, I'm going to tell you about the healing myth associated with Ascalapius. In version number 1, Ascalapius rendered some kind of kindness, and in exchange, a snake licked Ascalapius' ears clean and taught him secret knowledge. This kind of reminds me of the cartoon version of Robin Hood, where Sir Hiss the snake was whispering in the ear of Prince John that Robin was in the process of robbing the royal coach, and Prince John giggles and chuckles and says, "Hiss, stop hissing in my ear." Getting back to our story, for Greeks, snakes were considered to be sacred, and this is symbolism that goes all the way back, of course, to the Old Testament and Moses, and even to the creation. It's a symbol of wisdom, healing, and resurrection. So In version number 2, which is more dramatic, Ascalapius was commanded to restore the life of a guy named Glaucus. Ascalapius was confined in a secret prison until he could make this happen. So he's sitting there pondering on what he should do, and this snake crept near his staff, and Ascalapius killed the snake. My wife Jen would have done exactly the same thing. But as luck would have it, another snake came in with an herb in its mouth. When the herb was placed on the head of the dead snake, it came back to life. Now, if Jan was part of this story, we'd never have this myth because we'd have 2 dead snakes instead. But Ascalapius then took the herb that he put on the dead snake that was brought back to life and used that herb to bring Glaucus back to life. And that's the more dramatic version of the healing myth that we have that goes back to the 5th century BC. Now that you've heard all about the myths and legends, let's talk about reality. Ascalapius was probably a doctor from Egypt. He had great success healing people through psychological, mental, and spiritual means. So he was kind of the mindset that we have to heal the head as we heal the body. The cult of Ascalapius was very popular, and pilgrims flocked to healing temples that can be found in many ancient locations. So Pergamos is not the only location where there is a temple to Ascalapius. Some healing temples use sacred dogs to lick the wounds of the sick petitioners. There were also these non-venomous snakes often used in the healing rituals, and these Asklepion snakes, as they were referred to, slithered freely in the dormitories where the sick and the injured slept. There was also a ritual purification process that was followed by offerings and sacrifices to the god of those persons that had been healed. There's a legend related specifically to this center at Pergamos that there was a nobleman by the name of Archias who was injured while hunting in Greece, and he was healed at an Ascalapian center in Greece. As a token of thanks, he established the Ascalapian Epidaurus in Pergamos. Of course, you can't really tell for sure because it's just a legend. We do know that the healing center was originally established in the Hellenistic period, but there were dramatic changes and improvements made during the Roman era. We've taken a bit of a whirlwind tour of the Ascalapian center as I've explained a little bit of the backstory to you. I'll now explain some of these structures in more detail to you, including the theater, the library, the temple of Zeus Ascalapion, the treatment rooms, sleeping rooms, and the northern gallery. But we're going to begin our discussion with the entry and the road leading to the center at Ascalapius. The center at Asklepion was connected to the city of Pergamos by a 1 kilometer or 2,690 foot covered walkway with colonnades on either side called the Via Tecta, which means Holy Street or Sacred Way. This was constructed during the reign of Emperor Hadrian between 117 and 138 AD. That was the period of his reign. The street was lined with shops where people could buy gifts for the vows that they made to aid in the healing process. Archaeologists have found many gifts and other dedications that people made after their healings. For example, there were small terracotta body parts representing what had been healed. The starting point for this holy street was a great arch called the Ruined Gate. It was located south of the Roman theater that we'll be looking at in a little bit. The patients were examined at this gate, so it was kind of a triage center for the priests who were also doctors. I know we hear a lot about the separation of church and state today. Here they had no separation of church and medicine. They were connected at the hip, so to speak. The patients who were about to die and pregnant women were not accepted at the Asklepion Center. I was actually surprised by that. I can understand why they wouldn't want to accept people who were nearly dead because they didn't want to ruin their record. I mean, the reputation gets out that people who go there that are dying never end up living, and so, it kind of tarnishes the old reputation. But it surprises me that they didn't admit pregnant women, and I'm not sure what the logic of that is. That's what the rule was. The Ruined Gate that was the entrance into the Ascalapian center has not been reconstructed, but they did find an inscription that said, quote, "The death is forbidden to enter in Asklepion as respect to gods," close quote. To come into the entry of the Ascalapian center, you would have gone through what would have been the propylon, or the gateway, which divides and separates the secular from the sacred. One of the first things that you encounter is this column base that has a lot of inscriptions and other insignia and symbols, and you can see some of the snakes that are representative and symbolic of Ascalapius. To the left of the entry, you'll find the temple of Zeus Asklepius, also known as Zeus Ascalapius Soter, which means savior or saver. It was built in honor of Ascalapius and his daughter Hygeia, who is the goddess of what else? Hygiene. To the right of the entryway and opposite the Temple of Zeus, you have the Northern Gallery, or North Stoa, that was a covered walkway or portico that would have been under these columns that you're seeing here from the Roman era. In addition to the walkway, it would have had other buildings and structures that would have been occupied. We next come to the Roman theater that had a seating capacity of about 3,500. It was built in the Roman era by a nobleman from Pergamum, but no name has actually been found on any of the inscriptions connected with the theater. The upper part of the theater was a columned gallery. It also had seats of marble. There was an honorary box in the middle of the lower seating area, and the stage had 3 stories. It was actually the first of its kind in Asia Minor. There were also 5 niches in the stage area that were covered with glass mosaics. Here's an artist's rendition of what that theater would have looked like in its heyday. Just south of the theater, you have the sacred spring and pool of bathings. This was the place where people with health problems could bathe in the water of the sacred spring, and it was believed that the waters had healing power included with them. So this was a typical part of the healing plan here at this center. The water today is drinkable, but it's not recommended. We now go to the 200-foot-long Cryptoporticus, which is an underground vaulted tunnel that connects the circular treatment center to pools in the courtyard. This tunnel had water running down the steps of the tunnel that made a sound for a tranquil setting in which to sleep. It was for psychological support of the patients.
The gentle sound of the water. Gentle sound of the water.
In this corridor and in other locations, the patients would sleep, rest, and relax, trying to get rid of bad spirits. And you can see in these corridors they have these skylights where the doctors would be up on top whispering down through them for meditation and telling them and encouraging them to be healed. We're now going to go to the circular treatment building that we already took a little bit of a walking tour through earlier, but now I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about what happened and what went on in this treatment center that was sometimes known as the Temple of Telesphorus. This was actually a double-story facility at one point, but the second floor has not survived, and the sections that you're now looking at are actually underground. This is the location of the first medical school in Asia Minor. The second one was located in Ephesus, and this was also a hospital and healing center. We've seen some of the sleeping area in the tunnel coming to this circular area, and there were other sleeping rooms constructed in the Hellenistic period from 300 BC to 100 AD. However, only the foundations exist for these other sleeping centers. This was an area where they treated patients for psychological problems, and the patients, while they were sleeping, would have Ascalapius come to them in their dreams, telling them what they had to do in order to cure their illness. The treatments in this center included dietary supplements and helps with herbs and massages, vegetables, oils, creams, and also bloodletting. The diet was strictly a vegetarian diet, and they were teaching the disciples not only about what they should be eating, but how they should grow them and trying to help them with mental cures. In this facility, the patients were only allowed to eat once a day. They also engaged in sunbathing for physical illness, and there were some surgical operations as well. The reason this facility was located underground was because, in part at least, they were healing mentally ill patients, and back in that time in ancient society, those people with mental illnesses were essentially shunned and they were cast into prison. But Ascalapius brought them here and provided cures for them rather than imprisoning them. That concludes our tour of the Asklepion Center. We're going to head back down the sacred street that we came in on, and I'm going to stay quiet and allow you to enjoy the sights as we leave this ancient complex.